Welcome back to our channel, Daytime Drama Fanatic. Today is a truly phenomenal day for soap opera lovers, and we are diving headfirst into the most explosive, highly anticipated fallout that Port Charles has seen in years. The stage is set, the players are in position, and the drama is about to reach a boiling point. Let us jump right into the heart-pounding action. The moment General Hospital fans have been desperately waiting for has finally arrived, but the reality of Jason's highly anticipated homecoming is far darker and infinitely more complicated than anyone could have ever predicted. Jason spent months trapped in the absolute worst kind of hell, locked away in the shadowy, unforgiving world that the WSB built to break men. The nightmares of his brutal captivity came home with him long before his feet ever touched the pavement of Port Charles. On the tense, claustrophobic flight back to freedom, Jason was violently pulled back into the horrors of his past, flashing back to the horrific WSB black site in Jakarta, Indonesia, where he had been held against his will. This was no ordinary prison stint. This was a descent into a psychological abyss, a stark and terrifying reminder that this long-awaited return is absolutely not a clean slate. The sheer trauma etched into his face, the weight he has lost, and the haunted look in his eyes all scream of human rights violations and unimaginable suffering. Sitting in the confined space of that airplane cabin, the tension radiating from Jason was palpable enough to cut with a stranger in the seat beside him, the newly arrived Dr. Tristan Roberts, attempted to offer a polite passing pleasantry, telling Jason to simply enjoy the rest of his life. It was a bizarre, almost cruelly ironic thing to say to a man who had just spent months having his life systematically dismantled and nearly extinguished by a corrupt intelligence agency. Jason is physically home, yes, but he is far from whole, and that specific kind of psychological damage does not just vanish the It is a suffocating shadow that follows a man into every single room he walks into, whether he wants it to or not. Port Charles is about to witness a fundamentally changed Jason, a man who has been pushed to the absolute brink of human endurance and forced to rebuild his shattered psyche from the ground up. Meanwhile, completely oblivious to the fact that his father was currently descending from the clouds, Danny was fighting his own bitter, furious battles on the ground. The Metro Court Pool, usually a place of summer relaxation, transformed into a battleground for a deeply personal teenage war. Danny had been aggressively clashing with Rocco Falconeri once again, the tension between the two boys reaching a toxic, explosive fever pitch. Danny is still absolutely furious over the devastating secrets and the reckless shooting that sent his father away in the first place. Knowing that Rocco was the one who actually pulled the trigger on WSB director Ross Cullum, and that Jason selflessly took the fall and sacrificed his own freedom to protect the teenager, has left Danny carrying a massive, suffocating burden of resentment. The sheer injustice of his father rotting in the Jakarta black site while Rocco walked free was eating Danny alive, fueling a fiery confrontation that threatened to boil over into public chaos. Unable to stomach another second of Rocco's presence or the overwhelming weight of the lies surrounding them, Danny stormed off from the poolside altercation, his mind racing and his fists clenched in pure, unadulterated frustration. He desperately needed to clear his head, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the Metro Court and find a moment of peace away from the relentless drama of his family's. His frantic footsteps led him straight to the familiar, quiet sanctuary of the Quartermain boathouse. The wooden deck, the gentle lapping of the water, it was supposed to be a place to breathe, a place to process the blinding anger he felt toward a world that had unfairly ripped his father away. But as Danny stepped onto that dock, his entire universe shifted on its axis in the blink of an eye. Standing there on the deck of the Quartermain boathouse, looking battered, bruised, and fundamentally changed, was Jason. Every single ounce of fiery anger, bitter resentment, and heavy grief that Danny had been carrying for months completely evaporated into the cool Port Charles air the exact second he laid eyes on his father. Without a moment of hesitation, Danny ran straight into Jason's arms, gripping him with the desperate, fierce strength of a son who thought he might never see his hero again. It was the deeply emotional, tear-jerking reunion that fans have been breathlessly waiting for, a moment of pure, unadulterated relief. Jason held his son tight, his voice thick with emotion as he uttered the words Danny had been praying to hear. "I'm home for good." But even in the midst of that beautiful, long-awaited embrace, the agonizing timing of this homecoming speaks absolute volumes. Danny is still incredibly raw from Rocco's betrayal and the heavy burden of the WSB secrets, and his father has just walked blindly back into a house that is already completely engulfed in flames. Jason has absolutely no idea how deep the treacherous cracks in his family's foundation truly run, nor does he realize the sheer magnitude of the chaos that has unfolded in his absence. Home is one thing, a physical location on a map, But healing is an entirely different, infinitely more complicated battlefield. Port Charles is about to find out exactly which one of those realities wins first, as the honeymoon phase of Jason's return is destined to crash headfirst into the messy, dangerous reality of the life he left behind. One of the most massive, unresolved bombshells waiting for Jason in Port Charles is the undeniable, lingering presence of Britt Westbourne. Jason's complicated, fiery history with the Bridge did not end so much as it got violently and abruptly interrupted by the WSB's relentless interference. Before the nightmare in Jakarta began, the two were secretly finding their way back to each other, quietly planning a life that would finally take them far away from the dangerous, suffocating reach of the WSB and the mob. The emotional stakes were sky high. The very last thing Britt said to Jason, as he was forcibly loaded into that heavily guarded transport van, was a desperate, tearful declaration that she loved him. And Jason, in a rare moment of complete vulnerability, said it right back. Now, the landscape of Britt's life has drastically and traumatically shifted. She is finally out of WSB custody, having survived a harrowing ordeal on the run in Tortola and a terrifying arrest that ironically saved her from Ross Cullum's poison medication. She has been officially cleared of the horrifying, gaslighting, fake Huntington's disease diagnosis, but the victory is incredibly hollow. Britt is currently jobless, deeply traumatized, and aggressively rebuilding her life from absolute scratch. She is lashing out at everyone in her path, throwing massive tantrums and alienating her friends, including a confused Lucas Jones at Bobby's Diner. She has absolutely zero idea that the man she loves, the man who sacrificed everything, is actually back in town and breathing the same Port Charles air. The impending collision between Jason and Britt is a ticking emotional time bomb. Whether that explosive reunion happens the very moment she finds out he is free, or whether too much dark, traumatic water has passed under the bridge for either of them to safely go there again, is the absolute biggest question everyone in Port Charles wants answered immediately. Jason has been fundamentally altered by the torture of the black site, and Britt has been hardened by the cruel deception of the saline syringes and Marco Rios' senseless death. Can two people who have been dragged through the absolute depths of hell find their way back to that fleeting moment of love they shared by the transport van? Or will their respective traumas turn their reunion into a tragic, heartbreaking miss? Then, looming massively over Jason's return, is the undeniable shadow of Sonny Corinthos and the sprawling, dangerous empire this man built his entire life around before any of this WSB madness happened. Sonny is currently deeply embroiled in his own chaotic machinations, desperately trying to clean up his public image while ruthlessly managing his underworld territory. Sonny has just taken a highly coveted seat on the General Hospital Board, physically shaking hands and trading sarcastic, thinly veiled threats with Tracy Quartermain of all people. This shocking push for total corporate legitimacy is a massive pivot for the legendary mob boss, and Jason's sudden homecoming could either fold neatly into that new, polished narrative or blow it completely wide open the second Jason makes his ultimate decision. The burning question on every single insider's mind is whether Jason will ever step back into the dangerous, blood-soaked shoes of Sonny's lethal enforcer. After everything the corrupt WSB and the deceased director Ross Cullum put him through, after the agonizing months of isolation and psychological warfare, would Jason really walk willingly back into muscle-for-hire work, like absolutely nothing happened? The trauma of Jakarta has shifted his entire worldview. Does he finally cut the cord for good, choosing to prioritize his own fragile sanity and the safety of his overjoyed son, no matter what it ultimately costs Sonny and the fiercely loyal mob family he has spent decades protecting? However, there is a much darker, far more terrifying option that nobody in Port Charles wants to say out loud. Cold, calculated revenge. Ross Cullum may have met his grim fate on Spoon Island, but the sprawling, corrupt WSB apparatus that unjustly locked Jason away in a black site and tortured him is still very much operating in the shadows of Port Charles. There are plenty of dirty agents and complicit bureaucrats left who had a direct hand in the horrific suffering Jason endured. If the fundamentally changed Jason decides that someone needs to pay for what was done to him, this joyous homecoming stops being a heartwarming celebration incredibly fast. If Jason chooses the path of vengeance, Port Charles will not even see the devastation coming until it is already happening right in front of their eyes. A Jason operating off the books, fueled by PTSD, and a burning desire for justice against an international intelligence agency is the most dangerous force this town has ever seen. Whichever treacherous path he ultimately chooses to walk down, Danny's immense joy at getting his father back may tragically turn out to be nothing more than the eerie, unsettling calm before a catastrophic storm. The pieces are all moving on the board, and the fallout is guaranteed to be absolute dynamite. Every single resident of Port Charles is currently holding their collective breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jason is standing at the ultimate crossroads of his entire life. Will he run back into the fiery, passionate embrace of Britt Westbourne and try to salvage the beautiful future they were violently robbed of? Will he walk away from the treacherous mob underworld for good, leaving Sonny Corinthos to defend his territory alongside the likes of Rick Lansing? Or will he start meticulously planning his brutal, systematic revenge against the agency that stole months of his life? The tension is absolutely suffocating, and the stakes have never been higher for the Morgan, Corinthos, and Westbourne families. Jason is back, but the war is only just beginning. Sound off in the comments below. Should Jason run back to Britt, walk away from the mob, or start planning his ultimate revenge? Britt, the mob, or payback? Which way does Jason go?